Hi class, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about lesson 2, displaying data. So we're going to be talking about histographs as well as the different types of data. So there's something called categorical, continuous, and discrete data. So you'll know the difference between those. So you'll know how to draw a histograph. You'll know how the difference between categorical, continuous, and discrete data. And also we're going to be graphing data using bar graphs and pie charts as well. And in this, we're actually going to be talking about how to draw them on Google Sheets. And I might just put that up as a separate lesson just because it's easier to navigate it that way. Homework pages are up here. So you're going to be doing page 125 to 128, numbers 1 to 4, 6, 7, 9, 12. 125 to 128, sorry, that's just a repeat, so ignore that. And then 136 to 138, 1 to 4, 7, and 8, and then there's also handouts that I'm going to put up. Okay? All right, so again, we've already gone over the learning goals for this lesson, right? And I'm just going to get started. So in tabular form, it can be difficult to determine and identify trends and data. So to better understand your data, there's ways that we like to organize them. So we usually do them two ways. We have frequency distribution tables, and those frequency distribution tables we can turn into histographs. And when I say something in tabular form, like when you collect data, you kind of just like tally it and put it down. So it might be just hard to tell. So frequency distribution tables and histograms. So what happens with frequency distribution tables is that we can actually sort our data into intervals or classes and count the number of different entries that fall into each interval, right? And it just becomes easier to make a graph to see how the distribution is, and it allows us to spot quick trends. The rules are you can't have too few or too many intervals because then it makes it too hard to analyze your data. So what we try to do is we try to stick to about 50 to 20 intervals generally. And in order to do this, first you need to find the range of the data and then divide both numbers by 5 and 20 to determine how big each interval should be. Make sure the intervals don't overlap. If they do, you might need to count some entries twice. And so to avoid this, we use interval notation, which is square brackets on the left and then round brackets on the right. And the square bracket basically just means that a value is included in the interval, and the round bracket means that the value is not included. So for example, in this interval 120 to 130, it includes all numbers up to 130, but not 130 in itself. Okay, so let's make a frequency distribution table to represent the height by looking at the table below. So we have this height data, right? And the first thing we want to do is we want to make a histogram. So the first step to finding a histogram is you want to find it from the lowest to the highest range. So what you want to do is you want to find the range. So range, and the range you can find by taking the highest number, right? And then subtracting it from the lowest number. So if we go here and we look at our numbers, we'll find that our highest number is actually 183 right here. And our lowest number is 145, which is right here, right? So then I know our range is going to be the highest number, which is 183, minus 145, which is our lowest number, right? And it's going to fall somewhere in between that. So it's going to be about 38. So like we said, we only want to have either 5 intervals or to 20 intervals because you don't want too many, right? So let's see how much it would be if we had 5 intervals or 5 bars. Because you don't want too little intervals because that's not going to be useful, right? So we know that our number has to fall somewhere between 38 divided by 5, right? Which is going to be 7.6 per interval. Or 38 divided by 20, which is going to be about 1.9. Right? So if we want an interval, it can be anywhere from 1.9 units wide to 7.6 units wide. And usually I like to just pick a number that's easiest to like count. So I like 5. You can do any other number. It could be 6, it could be 4, but I think a good interval length is 5. And like, let's just go ahead and count from there, right? So let's count from 5. So let's choose a starting interval. naturally, it just makes sense. You want to include the lowest number, right? So be sure to include the lowest number and the highest number. So let's start at 145. So our first interval will be just 145. And then it's going to be going up by 5. So it'll be 145 to 150. Right? And you want to make sure that you know that 145 is included and then 150 isn't. So all the 150s won't be in that interval. So I messed up and I made these square brackets, but they should be round brackets. So now we have our interval. Our first interval is 145 to 150, and then our next interval is 150 to 155, then 155 to 160, right? Notice how we're just adding 5 plus 5 plus 5 to each interval to get the intervals, all the way up to 185. We know our biggest number is 183, so that includes everything that we need in it, right? So then what we can do is we can just go back here to this height data that we have and start tallying it up. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to say, okay, I have 170 here. So that falls under the interval here. So I'm going to put that tally there. And I like to just cross them out as I go. Then I have 169 that falls here. So I put the tally in here. And then I just cross it out up here. Then I have 183. That tally goes here. I just go back and cross it out. It helps if it's usually on the same page. There's too much space in between mine. But if the data's on the same page, it just makes it easier. Right, then I have 154, so I'm going to go find 154. That's going to go here. 161, I'm going to go here. 166 is going to go here, and so on and so forth. So I actually did this before this video, just so that you're not watching me go through it. So then it was 4, 6, 6, 5, 5, 3, and then this one's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, right? So that's how I just did it. I just tallied them all up, and then I wrote what the frequency was, so I just wrote it as a number. So I wrote 4, 6, 6, 5. I just counted the tallies for each column. 3, 4, oops, I made a mistake somewhere. 4, should be 5, 5. 5, 5, 3, 4, 2, right? And then what I like to do, just to make sure I got all the numbers, I know here there's a total of 35 numbers. So if I did 1, 2, 3, and then I looked across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? And if I just counted all the numbers out, I got 35. So I know there's a total of 35 numbers. So then I just like to check my work. So I had 4, and then 4 plus 6 is 10. 10 plus 6 is 16. 16 plus 5 is 21. 21 plus 5 is 26. 26 plus 3 is 29. 29 plus 33 is 4. 2 is 35. The other thing I could have done is I could have just gone and counted my frequency. I could have done 4 plus 6 plus 6 plus 5 plus 5 plus 3 plus 4 plus 2. Right, and I know that's going to give me 35, so I know that I got all the numbers. Okay, so now that's my frequency table. What I'm going to do with that information is that the cumulative frequency is always a good way to just double check our data, right? You're graphing the frequency column. So the one thing to be careful of, you're not graphing this column. You're graphing this column. So this is going to be your X, the interval, and this is going to be your Y, the frequency, right? So that just says right here, in order to graph our column, your Y-axis is going to be frequency, and your X-axis is going to represent what you're counting. So include a break in your graph unless the interval starts at 0. Ours started at 145, so there should be a break here, right? And then write the midpoint of the interval rather than the start and the end points. There's no space in between the bars since the intervals are continuous. So in a histogram, this is where this gets a little bit complicated. So when you actually put this into our Word document, right, or into our Google document, this is what your histogram will show up like. So you will have to go in and make a little bit of changes, right? So I like to just draw it out, and then I'm going to put the midpoint. So I know in between 145 and 150 is going to give me, so you're just going to find the midpoint. So how you find that is you add those two together and then divide by 2. So it's about 145.7, right? And I'm just going to do the same for the rest of them. There is a way that you can make this possibly happen. It's really complicated to figure out how to do this on our Google Docs, especially. There's a way to make it happen on the MS Office of it. So I'll show you in class how to do that, and then we can go from there. But for now, I'm just going to go in and change our intervals. So 155 plus 160, so it's going to be divided by 2. So then this is going to be 157.5. And like if I want to just go faster, I can just say 157.5 plus 5, right? Because the next midpoint is going to be in between those. 162.5. And I'm just scratching out the plus 5. 167.5. Right? And then I have 170. I'm going to scratch that out, and I'm going to put the midpoint here. So it's going to be 167.5 plus 5. It's going to be 172.5. And then 177.5. And then last but not least, we're going to have 182.5. And that's just the midpoint between all these intervals. Just right? So that's what our graph is going to look like. Okay. There's no spaces in between the bars. Even though there is little ones here, there's not big ones because the interval is continuous. It means that there's no break in the x values, right? So that is how you draw a histograph, right? You need to make sure that you have a title. So we could write height data, whatever your title for your graph might be. You have your x or your y labeled, you have your x labeled, and you have your x-axis and your y-axis all labeled as well. So it's just important to make sure that you have all those parts of your graph, right? So let's do a few more by yourself, right? So this is a great time to pause the video, go through and just use the steps to figure out what you would like or how you would like to do this, right? And then we can take them up together. So what we're going to do is questions 1 to 5 are based on the following information. So if I was just to look at this graph, right, and the first question it's asking is, why is it so hard to spot the trends as they appear? There's a number of reasons why it's so hard to spot the trends. The first is the numbers are all over the place. There's no organization. And no patterns, right? Like you can't see any patterns here. It's just random numbers in a form. So I know this is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So there's about 30 total numbers here, right? That means that there's 30 people who took this was, and it makes sense. The pulse of 30 people were taken for 1 minute and recorded. So this is pulse data, right? So we're looking at the pulses of people. So it's really hard to spot a trend because you kind of just have all these numbers all over the place. But what we could do is we could make a histogram, right? And that histogram will kind of help us spot a trend, right? So let's try to do that. So I went and found what the smallest number was. And I said, okay, the smallest number here is 53, right? And then I went and found what my largest number one was, and that's 92, right? So the first thing I did was find the interval. So then I did 92 minus 53 is equal to 39, right? So my number range is somewhere to 39. So let's go see what we can do. If we wanted to have an interval with 5, we would just do 39 divided by 5. So that would be 7.8 each, which is kind of big. And then you could do 39 divided by 20, which would be 1.95, which is also like not a fun number to work with. In this situation, I actually think I decided to work with 5, right? Just because I like that number and I like adding it, so I decided to do 5. Or 6, sorry. Yeah, I think I liked the number 6. So if I wanted to have six of each, right? That means I would have 8 intervals overall. So let's try that. Let's do that. Let's do 39 divided by 6, right? So let's do 53, which is my lowest number, and that's included in here, all the way up to 59, which won't be included in this set of data, right? So I just added 6. So I just added 6. Then let's do 59 all the way up to 65. Right, just adding 6. 65 plus 6 is going to be 71, right? 71 all the way up to 77. 77 all the way up to 83. 83 all the way up to 89. And then 89 all the way up to 93. And that has all of the data that we need in it. Okay, so let's go back here to our original numbers up here. And I like to just go and put in the tally. So at 66, it's going to go under this one. 92 is going to go under this chart. 71 is going to go here. 79 is going to go here. 56 is going to go here. 67 falls under here. 53, right? 67 again falls under here. 71 again falls under here. 81 falls under here. And I'm just going through this and putting in the numbers and where they go. And it's important. So notice how that was 77. This set of data doesn't include the 77. This one does. So just be mindful of where you put it. Okay? I did 81. 84 goes here. 91 goes here. 86 goes here. 76 goes here. 61 goes here. 62. I'm just going to go in and fill it out. And this is kind of just the tedious part because you got to actually think and go through it and categorize them out. This is why statistics sometimes isn't hard, it's just annoying. Right, so now let's do our frequency count. We have 2, 3, 5. This is going to be 7, 4, 5, and 3. Right? So let's go in and do our adding. So 2 plus 3. So this is cumulative frequency here will be 2. 2 plus 3 gives us 5. 5 plus 5 gives us 10. 5 plus 7 gives us 12. Plus 7 gives us 9. Oh, sorry, plus 4 gives us 16. plus 5 gives us 21, plus 3 gives us 24, which means I made a mistake somewhere because I should have 30 in total. So in this situation, yes, do I need to go back and figure out where I went wrong? Yep, indeed I do. So let's figure out where I went wrong. So I just like to, when I make a mistake like this, I just like to go back and I just redo it. This way you have to be a little bit careful with this. But I wonder why I missed so many. Okay, so I had 66, gonna go in here, 92, 71, 79, and then 62 will also go here. Okay, maybe that'll be better. I feel like I ended up with the same numbers. Nope, I got it right this time. All right, so then we had 2 plus 4, which would give us 10. Right, so we had 2 plus 4, which would give us 6, plus 4, 10, 17. 17 plus 5 is 22, plus 5 is 27, plus 3 gives us 30. So now we have our total cumulative frequency, which adds up to 30. So sometimes, yeah, you have to be really careful with these because if you make a mistake, it's really hard and you have to redo everything. So just be careful while you're going through them to make sure that you have some sort of method to how you're solving these. Okay, so let's make our histogram based on what we know. Right, so I'm just going to go in and I'm going to throw in just a little bit of grid paper for myself, right, to make this histograph. So I'm just going to pull up this histograph paper right now, right? When you're doing something like this, yeah, use graph paper. It just makes the most sense to use graph paper. It's the best way to go about it. So I'm just going to go in here and say, okay. And I'll always give you graph paper. I won't always give you a scale because that would give you what you need to do for your frequency tables, right? So we want to make our frequency distribution. So we know the highest distribution we have here is 5. So that means that my frequency is going to go up to 5, right? And that's always going to be my y-axis. So I'm going to do 1. This starts off at, and you just make sure that when you draw this in, you draw this in for making sure that's not starting at 0. So I'm going up 1, 2. So drop 1, 2, go up 3, go up 4, Go up 5 and 6, and 5 is our highest. Oh, 7 is our highest rather. So go up to 7, and then that kind of just adds up, right? So that's my frequency, right? And then I'm just going to put in my intervals and always put in the number in between. So I like to just go and do 53 plus 59, right? Divide that by 2. So one interval is going to be, and so how many intervals do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 intervals. So I like to just count that out. So I make each interval about 3. So I have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it kind of just added up for me. Right, so in the middle of this one is going to be my first interval, which is going to be 53 to 59. So it's going to be about 56. Right, and then let's go draw in how many I have there. I have 2. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to go up to 2. I always use a ruler to do this. Right, so make sure you use a ruler. And we left a little gap there because it didn't start exactly at 2. And now it's exactly like drawing a bar graph, right? So go up to 2, measure up to 2, and say, okay, that is my first bar of my histograph, right? And then you can just color it in. I'll do that after. It's a lot more work for me to color it in on my iPad. Right, now I'm going to go to my second interval, which goes from here to here, right? I'm just going to get rid of this. So I'm going up by 3 again, right? Let's go and measure that out. And I'm going to say, okay, it's going to go 59 to 65, right? 59 to 65, there's 4 of them. So I'm going to go all the way up to 4. Draw a line all the way up to 4. And just join this with the graph. Right, so I just like to go in ahead and draw it in. Okay, now I'm going to count over again. And again, you can always count by 5. I decided to pick 3 and just make sure that you put in your number in the middle. So make sure you put your labels in as well, right? So here, my label in the middle is going to be 56 plus 5, which is what I went up by, 61, right? And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, okay, it should be plus 6 because we went up by 6. So let's do 53 plus 59 divided by 6. That's going to be 56 here. And then we're just going to add 6, which was 62. Right, so each of those boxes, since we're going up by 3, each of those boxes actually represents 2. So I'm going to go over 3 more, right, which is another 6 boxes, or 6 in my interval, right? So now I'm going to go, okay, 65 to 71 is also 4. So I'm going to go up to 4, draw my line down. Right, and I'm just going to label that as 62 plus 6. You want to label just in the middle, which is 68, right? So I'm done my first interval, I'm done my second interval, I'm done my third interval. I'm going to go to my fourth interval, which is a 71 to 77 range. So that's going to go, that has a frequency of 7. So that has the highest frequency. So let's go up here, right, and draw a line from here to 7. Oops. Wrong color. And this is why using a ruler is so important, because it'll be impossible for you to get these lines and get the right accurate lines without one. So please make sure you have a ruler that you're using. And I will also show you how to do these on docs as well. So then we have that. Right, and then naturally I want to put in my 68 plus 6, right? For my new interval, the middle of my new interval is 74, which makes sense because the middle of 71 and 77 is going to be 74, right? Moving forward, let's go on to 77 and 83. That goes up to 5. Again, 3 over, so I'm just going to go here, draw a line up to 5, right? Over. And then the middle of that is going to be 80. And then I have that one done. Now I'm going to say, okay, 83 to 89 is my next interval. There's 5 at that one too. So I'm going to go over, and I like to draw a straight line up to 5 again. Make a bar. Right? And then the middle of that is going to be 86. And then our last but not least interval is 89 to 93. Right? So we're going to go and draw a line here. And we know that there's 3 in that bucket. So I'm going to go here, draw a line up to 3. 1, 2, 3, right here. And then make a bar there. Right? And the middle of that graph is going to be 92. And that's our histogram. So again, obviously you should color this in if you would like to, but I'm not really picky about it. But that's how you draw your histogram. You should write a title at the top. So in this situation, what we're measuring is the pulses of people, right? So let's write pulse rate of people, right? We labeled our frequency. We should write in the bottom, this is our pulse rate. You just need to label everything. And that's our answer. That's what our histograph will look like, right? So it says, use your graph to answer the following questions. And now that we have this kind of displayed properly, right, we can use our graph to do a lot more stuff. So what interval does the most common pulse occur at? So let's look here. What interval does the most common pulse occur at? It's the one that has the highest bar, right? Which we know occurs at the one where 74 is in the middle. So in between 71 and 77 beats per minute, right? So we know it's going to be 71 to 77. And it's really easy to read that data off of our graph because it's right there. So that's the interval that it occurs at. At which interval does the least common pulse occur? So let's go look and be like, what's our lowest number here? What's the lowest bar? It's at the 56 mark, right? So we know that the interval is 53 to 59. Is our lowest pulse. Right, and now it's asking how much people have a pulse over 83. So let's go look at where 83 lies. Or 83 is like about the end of this interval right here, right? So we have our 83, which is right here. I'm just going to put it in the yellow, right? How much percent of people have a pulse rate higher than that? So we have this one, which is 5. And this one, which is 3. So 5 plus 3 people have a rate higher than that. So that means that 8 people have a rate higher than that. And you want to find out what percentage. So 8 out of 30 people have a pulse rate higher than 83. So if I want to find percentage, I just need to do numerator over denominator times 100, which is going to give us 27%. So I can say 27% of my people have a pulse higher than 83. Right? If you were to record the pulse for 300 people, how much would you expect to have a pulse rate between 75.5 and 80.5? Let's go look here and be like, okay, actually I ended up changing this number just because of the way that our data ended up working out. So I made this 71 to 83. It's just easier to read from your chart. Well, let's go here and look at, okay, where's 71? So 71 is the ending of our fourth interval, right? So about here. So 71 to about 83, which was, we were just looking at it right here. So that means that that is 7 people plus 5 people. So 7 plus 5 people is going to give us 12, right? So 12 out of 30 people times 100. So we want to find the percentage. So 12 divided by 30 is going to be 40%, right? So 40% of people have a pulse rate in our group of 30, right? So if we want to find out how many of them will have that same pulse rate, we're going to assume 40% of all people do. So it'll be 40 times 300, which is our new population, which is going to be 120 people. Right? Because we took, this is what our regular population was. We multiplied by 100, found out how much of percent of our population had it. Then we extrapolated that data and we said, okay, how much would it be if we just used the same type of, we had the same distribution for people who, just for a larger group of people. So the assumption that we're making here is that all the people from the first sample are fair, right? So we found a fair representation of the first sample. Of the whole population. And we talked about that yesterday when we were talking about samples. So let's move on and do questions 6 to 10. Same idea. They're going to be now, instead of a pulse rate, we're going to be talking about a math test that was given to the class, right? There's 29 students in this class, so you don't have to map it out. So your entire frequency should add up to 29 students, right? You're going to answer questions 6 to 10. You're going to make a frequency distribution. You're going to create a histogram. I'm just going to show you what the histograph looks like because I'm actually going to make it in a Excel file, right? But you can do that on your own. So I will show you how to do that. Okay? So take a minute, take a break here and try to do it on your own, and then we can go on from there. Okay? Alrighty. So hopefully you took time to do this on your own. I'm going to go in and make our table here, right, just because it's the easiest thing to do. So let's do interval, tally, right, I'm just copying the table from before, frequency, and remember I'm going to graph interval and frequency and culminative frequency. This is just for me to double check that I'm doing it right. Okay, so let's go in and solve this. So interval, I want to go find my lowest mark and my highest mark. So my lowest mark here is 23, which is right here. So 23, and my highest mark in the class was 92, right? So 92 minus 23 is going to give us 69, right? So either I can have 69 divided by 5, I can have somewhere between 13.8 per box, or if I do 69 divided by 20, I can have 3.45 per box. I think when I decided to do with this was the nicest number between that for me was 10, right? Because it's just easier to count by tens. So I did 10. So I'm going to make each interval 10. So each interval is 10 units. Because I just liked it, like I liked that number. So each bucket is going to be 10 units, right? So the first one I'm going to start with 20 to 30. That was a nice number to start with. Then 30 to 40. And then just make sure you put in your data the right way, right? 40 to 50. 50 to 60. Then 60 to 70, right? And I need one more line after, but that's fine. And then I did 70 to 80, and then I needed 80 to 90. And let's go in and tally. right? So here we have, let's just go in and do each number individually. So I have 26, that falls here, 40 falls here, 46 in here, 63. And I actually require concentration to do this, so I'm going to do it as we go along. Oh, sorry, and then I need to do 90 to 100. Okay, I'm going to start all over again just because I don't know if I messed it up. So like I said, concentration. And I don't want to have to go back and redo everything. So I'm going to make sure that I do it right. And you can skip through this if you've already done it. Okay, I think that's it. So let's just make sure we have 3, 3 plus, and then 2. So the cumulative frequency here, I'm just doing it as we go. Then 4, 5 plus 4 is 9. 5, and then 6. 9 plus 6 is going to give us 15. Another 6. That's going to give us 21. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This should be 5, right? 21 plus 5 is going to give us 26. Right? 2, 1 plus 1 is going to give us 29, which is right because we had 29 students, right? So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to actually graph my interval and my frequency. So like I said, I actually went in and made this on my Google, in my doc. So I'm just going to go in and put my numbers in there. So it's 3, 2, 4, 6, 6, 5, 2, 1, right? And then I just graphed it, and I'll show you how I made that graph. I'll actually pull it up for you over here and what my graph looked like. So my graph looks like this. So I'm just going to pull it up here, show you what it looks like. My graph looks like this, and like I said, just easiest for me to graph it. I'm not going to go ahead and draw it out. I'll show you in a different video how to do that. But if you look to your right here, it's just loading. That is what my graph looks like, right? So each bucket has its own set of data. You should go in and make it so that it's only halfway through. So 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, 75, and 85, and 90, right? So that's just the best way to go about it. But everything's there, so that's just the test number 1, right? Let's go and see what's the interval that has the greatest frequency. Let's go look at what's the interval that has the greatest frequency. It seems to be 50 to 70, so most students scored between 50 to 70%, right? So 50 to 70. And notice how it's just easier to read when it's in graph form, right? Instead of having to look at this and be like, okay, what's the greatest frequency of numbers? Like, I can't even find, like, I can't even keep my eyes straight here sometimes, right? What's the percentage of the class that received an 80 or better? And it's really easy to find that. Go to 80%, right? And saw how many people did better than 80% or higher. So we have a frequency of 2 here and a frequency of 1. So that means 3 out of 29 students got higher than an 80, or they got an A. So we can do 3 divided by 29 multiplied by 100 will give us the percentage of the class that did over 80, that did well. So 3 divided by 29 times 100 is about 10% of the class, right? So 10% of the class got higher than 100. What percentage of the class got below 50? So let's go here and look at, where's our 50? And let's look at what numbers are lower. So we have 3, we have 2, and then we have 4. So let's add those together. 3 plus 2 plus 4. Right? So that means a total of 9 kids fell into this bucket. Right? So we had 9 divided by 29 multiplied by 100. Right? So 9 divided by 29 is 0.31 times 100 is going to be 31. That means 31% of the class got below 50. So the next thing asked is the same class wrote a second test. These are their marks, right? I am going to just go ahead and fill the frequency table for you. And that's just because nobody wants to watch me count the frequency again. It's quite tedious, but you can go in and do it yourself. So I'm just going to go in and put in what my frequency table was already, just so that you can see it, right? So I went in and I organized it the same way, right? I had our intervals. I decided to go same with 10 intervals. I went up to 20. And that's just because I had somebody in this class score below a 20%. I think the lowest one in this class, or not me, this isn't my class, but this was 14% out of 100, right? And then the highest mark in the class was, I believe, a 90, or an 89, something like that. 89, there you go. It was an 89. So what I did was I just counted the boxes according to that, right? So I made it 10, 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, 60 to 70, 70 to 80, 80 to 90. Then I just counted all of my numbers, and then I counted the frequency, and they all added up, right? Then I took the interval and the frequency, and then I went into my Google Classroom, or into my Google Doc, and I made it. So I made this on Excel, but I'll show you how to do those, right? So I'm just going to bring down the histograph so that you can see it. That's what my second histograph looks like. So you have like this one little outlier over here, right? And the rest of them kind of all bulk into this portion. We don't have anybody who scored between a 20 and a 30. Right? So let's look at the two histographs that we created. So I'm actually going to take this one from up here and just drag it down so we can compare them side by side. It'll just be easier to work with that. Right? So let's just drag it down, and then I'll eventually just take it back. Right? So let's compare these two. So let's compare these two histographs that we have here. Right? So we have our first test and our second test. And in our second test, we noticed that, and again, you're going to go in and you're going to do 15 and all of that stuff, but I'm not going to do that right now. In our second test, let's compare the differences here. So they all kind of have a central tendency. Notice how they kind of all like, there's some kids who did really well and some kids who did really poorly. Like the 90s and the 100s kind of seem to be like off on their own, right? And even the 10s and 20s, like those ranges seem to have less people in them. More people seem to fall between the 50 to 70 range in both of these tests. Some differences is there seems to be more students who failed this test, right? Like if you think about it, there's 6 plus 4 plus 1, right? And that's 11 versus 9 students who failed that test. There seems to be no one in this class who got over a 90 in this one. So that's a difference, right? A majority of the students seem to still fall between the 50 to 70 range. It's just in this situation, more of them seem to fall lower. And what the information might indicate to the teacher is that test number 2 was actually harder than test number 1. So they might want to go back and look at how students did. They might want to go back and think about how they were evaluated. They might want to go back and see, okay, do I need to reteach some things? Were some of the questions not hard enough or too hard? So it's a good way for a teacher to gauge just by looking at these distribution charts, like, okay, where did my students struggle, right? And like if I had looked at this distribution chart and like a majority, like there's like 10 or 17 people that fell down here, but like, you know, another 10, 17 that fell in this range, that means that either people did very well or very poorly, and that could indicate to me that the people who did poorly didn't study, or that there's something going on in the class or miscommunication for a different type of learner, right? So that's why we would look at that data and how we would interpret it. So let's go on to lesson 4.4, to the next part, which is displaying data. So data can be recorded in several ways, right? We're going to look at 3 different types. We have categorical data, which is qualitative data, right? This is data that you usually record as a label. So if you go into a survey and they ask you what you identify as, male, female, gender non-binary, right, two-spirited, any of that stuff, that falls under categorical. We can't really measure that objectively. The type of car you drive, right? Like I can't say a Toyota is like a 7 and like a Honda is an 8. Like that doesn't make any sense. Your eye color, all that stuff is very qualitative data. There's no way for me to measure it, right? Then we have quantitative data, which is continuous, right? And so quantitative data is a number quantity, right? It's numerical data where the value can exist between recorded values. So that means that decimals are allowed, right? So any type of measurement, weight, time, temperature, where decimals are permitted is continuous. And then we have our last one, which is discrete data, which is also numbers, but these numbers, decimals are not allowed, right? So like people. You can't have half a person. The number of hockey scores, right? Like you can't have 2.5 goals. You can't have 2.5 pizza toppings. Money in cents, right? Like you can only have 50 cents or 51 cents or 52 cents. You can't have 52.6666 cents, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. So that is qualitative data or discrete data. So the difference between discrete and continuous is, if you really just think about it, can you have a random like 2.67891 type of number? Like can you have multiple decimals for that data? No, then it's discrete. Okay. So for each of the type below, let's see which one of these are what type of data. The number of cars, so we already know it's numerical, so it's going to be between discrete and continuous in a parking lot. You can't have half a car in a parking lot, so we just know this is going to be discrete, right? The type of pet at home, we already know that this isn't going to be a number, so it has to be qualitative, which we know is our categorical data. Right? Then we have the number of pets at home. So we know this is a number, but we can't have half a pet at home, right? So this is going to be discrete. And the amount of coffee in milliliters consumed during the day, this, because it's in milliliters, right, can be continuous. You can consume like 0.00067% of coffee in a day, right? So this is continuous. Okay, so that is our different types of data. So when we're graphing our data, there's several different types of graphs that we can use. So we already did histograms, which are bars that we use to represent continuous data, right? So there's no breaks in between them. Bar graphs are used to represent discrete or categorical data, right? So there has to be spaces in between these bars, right? So if I wanted to know how much goals Wayne Gretzky scored, or different hockey players scored over the course of their lifetime, I would use something like a bar graph. This is going to be categorical data because Wayne Gretzky is a person, so he falls under a category, right? So let's go and make that. I'm sure you all know how to make bar graphs, so I'm not going to do it on this. I'm going to actually do this as well on my my computer, and I'm just going to show you very quickly what your bar graph would look like. And if you were to draw it by hand, it would look the same, but I do want us to start knowing how to use the computer to do this as well, especially because this is going to be an assignment. So you can definitely use your computer to graph, and it's just a faster way to have everything put out. So I'm going to just go in. You're going to take the name of the player. So I'm going to say Wayne Gretzky. And I'm going to make a different page for you all to have this. So that you can go in and see how I did this on Google Sheets. It's really easy. You're just going to put everything in. You're just basically going to copy this table, right, into your graph, and then you can hit graph on it, and I'm just going to show you what it's going to look like. So I just got to copy it over here. And like I said, I will definitely be posting this for you all after, and how to do it for sure, but just wanted to show you what it looks like so that you know kind of what your graph should look like, right? And why I prefer to use our online sources, just because it's a little bit easier to graph with them. So that's what it would look like, right? That's what our entire graph would look like. So we can kind of go in and be like, okay, who scored the most graphs or the most goals? It's obviously Wayne Gretzky. And then we can go and look at the trends here and see, compare people to each other. Okay. Circle graphs are very similar, right? So when we do circle graphs, there's just a little bit extra that we need to do, in that we need to divide everything into degrees, right? So I'm just going to show you how to quickly do that as well. So like I said, with bar graphs, you can just take the data straight away, put it into a bar graph. But with circle graphs, you need to do a little bit more work, right? So in a circle graph, when you're trying to find out how much a space the circle is going to take, right, the first thing you need to do is find out how many degrees it's going to take up in that circle. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take, okay, this is how much everything costs. So it's 900, 400, 500, 100, 200, right? And it's all going to add up to 2100. So now I want to find out, this entire chart is going to be 2100, right? So there's 2100 little spots in this entire chart for us to fill out, right? What we want to find out is how much does each of these take in that chart. So I want to find out 900 divided by 2100, which is the total amount, right? And then I'm going to multiply that by 360, because there's 360 degrees in a circle. And that adds up to 154. So I know this is going to take up 154 degrees, right? Same thing here, 400 divided by 2100 multiplied by 360. I know it's going to take up 69 degrees. Okay, and I'm just going to do the same thing for the rest of them. 500 divided by 2100 times 360 is going to add up to 86 degrees, right? 100 divided by 2100 multiplied by 360 is going to give me 17 degrees, right? 200 divided by 2100 360 is going to give me 34. So I'm going to just go ahead and make sure that I did it right, in the sense that if I add 154 plus 69 plus 86 plus 17 plus 34, I should get 360, which I do. So I know I evened everything out properly. So what I'm going to do now, and since I don't have a protractor that I can show you on this app, what you're going to do is you're going to go to the circle, right? And then put your protractor right in the middle and measure out 154 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to measure out 154 degrees, and I'm just going to use my ruler or my protractor, whatever I'm using, right? And draw a line saying, okay, that piece of my pie is going to be 154 degrees, right? So this is going to be rent. right? The next one is going to be 69 degrees. So again, I'm going to pull out my protractor and I'm going to say, okay, let's go ahead and measure that. And I'm going to measure out the angle for 69 degrees and say, okay, so this is going to be, oops. So from here, I like to measure it out from here to whatever the next point is going to be. So this is 69 right here in the middle, right? That's how I like to measure them out. So that's 69. Then I'm going to use this one and I measure out all over. That's going to be 86. I'm just going to draw this out. 86 degrees. Then I have 17 degrees, right? And then I have 34 degrees. And obviously, because I didn't use a protractor, it's not very clear. Right? So that's what it's going to look like. And then each section of this is just going to be, so that's rent. This is transport. This is food, right? This is clothing. This is entertainment. And I'm going to show you what a better graph of this looks like because I have one made already with my software. So then I'm just going to go in, I'm going to say, okay, what does that look like? So then and I'll show you again how to do this. And you're just going to insert a pie graph now, right? So that is what my pie is going to look like. And I'm actually going to take so this is a more accurate representation of what your graph should look like because this one actually used the protractor and I didn't. So I'm just going to go down here and that's what your pie graph should look like, right? Again, better representation because they actually use a protractor, but if you had used a protractor, this is what it would show up like. Okay, and that is it. That's the end of this lesson. I will put up a video eventually of how to work through the Google Sheets doc, but we'll go through that together in class as well.